My son had been traveling for work for 2 years at least. That's what my daughter-in-law told me. Sloane was always so attentive, almost too much. But one Saturday morning at the farmer's market, a delivery driver slipped a package into my hands and whispered, "Are you Nash's father?" When I nodded, he glanced around nervously. "I can't keep this anymore. Watch it alone." I drove home and opened it at my kitchen table. What I found inside made the room spin. Before I tell you what was inside that package, I need to know, where are you watching this from right now, and what time is it where you are? The Saturday morning farmer's market in Riverside, Oregon had been my weekly ritual for decades. At 63, I'd learned to find comfort in the familiar rhythm, selecting tomatoes from Martha's stand, trading weather talk with neighbors who'd known me since Rose and I bought the ranch 40 years ago. The October air carried that particular crispness that reminded me of easier times. My name is Henry Hayes, and for 3 years, 2 months, and 8 days, I'd been telling everyone that my son Nash was thriving overseas with his consulting career. Dubai, Singapore, Tokyo. His wife Sloane explained it with practiced ease whenever someone asked. The modern professional life, she'd say with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. I wanted to believe her. God knows I tried. I was examining late-season apples when I felt someone watching me. "Mr. Hayes." The voice belonged to a man in his 30s, wearing a delivery company uniform, his face pale. His hands trembled as he extended a package wrapped in brown paper. "You're Nash Hayes' father." "I am." I set down my basket. "Do I know you?" "No, sir. My name's Dean Shaw." He glanced around the crowded market like a deer scenting wolves. "I've been making deliveries for someone, and I saw your son, and I—" His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "I can't keep this anymore. The truth matters, Mr. Hayes. Whatever they've told you, the truth matters." He pressed the package into my hands with sudden urgency, then backed away. "I'm sorry. I tried to do what was right, but I have a family. I can't—" He disappeared into the Saturday crowd before I could ask what he meant. I made it to my truck before my hands started shaking. The package sat on the passenger seat, innocuous brown paper concealing whatever had driven a stranger to seek me out with fear in his eyes. I drove the 10 miles home on autopilot, my mind racing. The ranch stood at the end of a long gravel drive, surrounded by 30 acres. Rose and I had built our life on. After she passed 2 years ago, the silence had become a weight I carried in every empty corner. Now I set the package on the kitchen table, the same oak surface where we'd shared countless family meals, and forced my fingers to steady. Inside, I found a USB drive, a folded letter, and a photograph that stopped my heart. The photograph showed Nash, unmistakably my son, despite the gaunt hollows in his cheeks and the haunted look in his eyes I'd never seen before. He stood in front of a concrete wall holding a newspaper. The date was visible, April 14th of this year, 6 months ago. But it wasn't just Nash's appearance that turned my blood cold. It was the setting, the institutional quality of the background, the way he seemed to be posing reluctantly as though compelled. This wasn't a business trip. This wasn't Dubai or Singapore. The letter in my hand began simply, "Mr. Hayes, my name is Dean Shaw. I work for Quick Ship Deliveries, and for the past year I've been making deliveries to a facility outside Portland on behalf of your daughter-in-law." I looked back at the photograph, then at the USB drive sitting on my kitchen table like a loaded gun. The photograph showed my son standing in front of a concrete wall, holding a newspaper dated 6 months ago. He wasn't in Dubai. He'd never left Oregon at all. For a long moment, I just stared at the photograph. Then my hands steadied, and I reached for the USB drive. Rose's old laptop sat on the corner of the kitchen table. She'd given it to me 3 years ago for my birthday, insisting I learn to use email so I could stay in touch with Nash overseas. The irony wasn't lost on me as I powered it on and inserted the drive. 6 video files appeared on screen, each labeled with dates spanning the past 14 months. I clicked the first one. My kitchen materialized the same room where I sat now, filmed from an angle near the ceiling. The timestamp showed last November, Tuesday afternoon. I watched Sloane enter through the back door, using her key move directly to the cabinet where I kept financial documents and photographed page after page with her phone. 4 minutes later, she was gone. I'd been at book club that day. The second video showed Rose's study. Sloane rifling through files my wife had meticulously organized, photographing tax returns and property deeds. The third caught her in the basement, searching storage boxes I hadn't opened since Rose passed. Each video revealed the same methodical pattern, Sloane moving through my home, like a professional systematically documenting anything related to the ranch or our assets. My initial shock hardened into something colder. I set the videos aside and unfolded Dean Shaw's letter fully. His handwriting was cramped urgent. Mr. Hayes, I work for Quick Ship Deliveries. For the past year, I've been making deliveries to a facility outside Portland for your daughter-in-law. Good money, no questions asked. 3 weeks ago, I saw your son through a window during a delivery run. He looked at me with this recognition not of me, but of the outside world itself, like a prisoner glimpsing daylight. Dean described how he'd started asking questions, following up with contacts, piecing together what was really happening. Nash wasn't traveling. He'd been institutionalized the entire time. I have a family. I've been warned about interference. But your son needs help I can't give. Someone has to know. The letter ended there unsigned beyond the typed name. I opened the final file on the USB drive. A medical report, clinical and precise. Patient Nash James Hayes. Facility, Cedarbrook Care Center, 2847 Riverside Drive, Portland. Diagnosis, severe traumatic brain injury. Cognitive impairment, requiring ongoing supervision. Legal guardian Sloan Calloway. Visiting restrictions, guardian approval required. The admission date stopped me cold 3 years, 2 months, 9 days ago. One day after Nash had supposedly left for his first assignment in Dubai. Sloan had taken legal guardianship while I'd been telling neighbors my son was building his career overseas. She'd locked him away in a facility less than an hour from my ranch, close enough that I could have driven there any Saturday after the farmer's market. And for 3 years she'd been systematically searching my home photographing documents, looking for something. But what? I sat in the darkening kitchen, Rose's laptop glowing before me, and understood the scope of the deception. My son wasn't abroad. He'd been imprisoned, his life stolen, while his wife maintained the perfect lie and hunted through my house for whatever would complete her plan. Tomorrow I'd see Sloan when she dropped off the kids. Tomorrow I'd have to look her in the eye and pretend I knew nothing. My hands no longer trembled. The fear had burned away, leaving only cold, clear purpose. The next morning my phone buzzed. Sloan, can you watch Ivy and Knox today? Something came up. I replied with steady fingers. Of course. Happy to have them. Within the hour my grandchildren tumbled through the door. Knox, 6 years old, launched himself at my legs, clutching the old toy truck that had once been Nash's. Ivy hung back 8, and already too perceptive, studying my face with dark eyes she'd inherited from her father. Who wants to make cookies? I led them into the kitchen where Rose had taught Nash to bake. We mixed flour and sugar. Knox chattered nonstop, but Ivy remained quiet, measuring ingredients with careful precision. Grandpa, her voice was barely above a whisper. When is Daddy coming home? The wooden spoon stilled in my hand. I thought of the photograph, Nash's gaunt face, those haunted eyes. 3 years stolen while I'd believed Sloane's lies. Your daddy loves you very much, sweetheart. No matter where he is, that never changes. Mommy says he's too busy to call. Knox's enthusiasm dimmed. Did Daddy forget us? I knelt down, pulling them both close. Never. Your father would never forget you. I promise. Ivy's eyes searched mine. You promise? I promise I'll find out what's happening with your daddy. After lunch, they played in the yard while I watched from the porch. Knox ran through the tall grass with his truck. Ivy sat under Rose's apple tree, drawing in her notebook. When she showed me later, it was our family stick figures holding hands. But the one labeled Daddy stood apart, separated by a dark line across the page. Sloan arrived at 6 perfectly composed in designer jeans and cashmere. Thank you so much, Henry. I don't know what I'd do without you. Anytime, they're good kids. She lingered at the door, and I recognized the shift, the subtle preparation for what she'd really come to say. By the way, I've been helping Nash sort out some investment questions remotely. I thought Rose might have kept copies of certain financial documents, old property records, maybe trust papers. You and Rose were always so organized. There it was. The real reason she'd needed me to watch the kids. I kept my face neutral. I'm not sure what I have. I can look if you'd like. Relief flickered across her face. That would be wonderful. No rush. Maybe I could come by next week and we could go through things together. Sure thing. After she left with the kids, I stood alone in my kitchen, understanding, crystallizing. Sloan had searched my home for 3 years, photographed every document she could find, but still hadn't located what she needed. Now she was asking directly, and I'd just agreed to help her find it. But there was one place she didn't know about. One place I'd nearly forgotten myself. Rose had always been meticulous about important papers. After she passed, I'd found a small key in her desk drawer with a tag reading Riverside Community Bank Box 247. At the time, I'd set it aside too grief-stricken to deal with paperwork. Tomorrow I'd go to that bank and see what my wife had hidden away, what she'd kept secret, even from me. Whatever Sloane was searching for, Rose had made sure it stayed out of her reach. Monday morning arrived too fast. I stood before Riverside Community Bank at 9 sharp, clutching the small key I'd found in Rose's desk drawer. A key I'd forgotten about until Sloane's questions reminded me it existed. The young clerk smiled pleasantly as I approached. "Good morning, Mr. Hayes. How can I help you?" "I need to access my late wife's safety deposit box." I slid the key across the counter along with my identification. She checked her computer, nodded, and led me through the heavy vault door into a private viewing room. The metal box slid out smoothly, heavier than I'd expected. She left me alone with whatever Rose had hidden away. Inside, I found a legal document labeled Hayes Family Trust, Confidential, a sealed envelope marked, "For Henry. If you're reading this, I'm gone," and copies of property deeds and financial records. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope first. Rose's familiar handwriting filled the pages dated 6 months before she passed. "My dearest Henry, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I pray you never needed to find it. But I've learned to trust my instincts, and my instincts about Sloane have troubled me for years. I've noticed things small at first, lies about where she's been, money that doesn't match her salary, the way she watches Nash when she thinks no one is looking, not with love, but with calculation. I've created this trust without telling anyone except Chase Holt. It protects Nash and the children. If anything happens to Nash, if Sloane tries to control his assets or ours, this document prevents it. The ranch, the land, everything stays in trust for Nash, and the kids managed by you. She gets nothing. Fight for our son Henry. Don't trust obvious answers. You're stronger than you know. All my love, Rose." I sat in that small bank room, Rose's letter in my hands, and felt something break open inside my chest. My wife had known. Somehow she'd sensed the danger before any of us, and she'd tried to protect us from beyond the grave. 20 minutes later, I burst into Chase Holt's office downtown. The old lawyer looked up from his desk, concern etching his features when he saw my face. "Henry, what's wrong?" I laid out everything. The package from Dean Shaw, the videos, the medical report, Nash imprisoned, at Cedarbrook Sloane's guardianship, her systematic search of my home. Chase listened without interrupting, his expression darkening with each revelation. "Rose came to me 3 years ago," he said, finally pulling a file from his cabinet. "Right after her diagnosis. She was worried about something, but wouldn't say exactly what. This trust is ironclad, Henry. It supersedes everything. Sloane has no access to your assets or Nash's inheritance. Can she contest it?" "She can try. But Rose was of sound mind when she created it, and the medical records from that period prove it." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "However, if what you're telling me is true, if Sloane obtained guardianship through fraud, she's committed multiple felonies. We need evidence stronger than videos and suspicion. We need proof from inside that facility." He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a business card. "Ford Steele, former FBI. If anyone can get the proof we need, it's him." I took the card, studying the simple text. "I'll call him." "Henry," Chase's voice was grave, "these people are dangerous." A journalist started asking questions about facilities like Cedarbrook 6 months ago. She published one article about guardianship exploitation. The article disappeared from the website within 48 hours. 2 weeks later, she died in a hit and run. The case was never solved. Chase handed me the business card, Ford Steele Private Investigations. "If anyone can get the proof we need, it's him. But Henry, these people are dangerous. Be very, very careful." That evening, Ford Steele appeared at my ranch after dark, moving like a man accustomed to danger. He'd swept my property for surveillance devices before knocking a precaution that made Chase's warnings feel suddenly terrifyingly real. "No bugs I could find," he said by way of greeting, "but assume you're being watched anyway." Inside, I laid out everything while Ford examined the videos, the medical report, Dean Shaw's letter. His face remained impassive until I mentioned Nash at Cedarbrook. "This is bigger than family fraud." Ford's voice was flat professional. I knew Quinn Drake, the journalist who investigated these facilities. She was careful, thorough. Published one article about guardianship exploitation before it vanished from the newspaper's website within 48 hours. 2 weeks later, hit and run on Interstate 5. Driver never found. He met my eyes. If they killed a reporter for asking questions, they won't hesitate with a rancher doing the same. The words settled like ice in my gut. Ford outlined what he called operational security. Cash only for anything related to the investigation. No phone discussions about the case. Innocent explanations for any unusual activity. Trust no one. I'll start with Cedarbrook pose as a family member looking to place a relative. Get inside, assess the situation. But this takes time, and if they're watching you, we need to be smart about every move. After he left, I sat in the darkness of my kitchen, understanding for the first time that I wasn't just fighting Sloan. I was fighting something much larger, much more ruthless. The next morning, my phone buzzed. Unknown number, stop asking questions about Nash Hayes. This is your only warning. I forwarded it to Ford without responding. That afternoon, Sloan showed up unannounced, perfectly composed in a tailored blazer. I was in the area. Found some forms just medical record authorization for Nash's care coordination. Could you sign here? I took the papers but didn't open them. I'll have Chase review these first. Her smile tightened. Your lawyer, Henry, it's just standard paperwork. I don't sign anything without legal review. That's just common sense. Something flickered across her face. Calculation, maybe anger before the mask returned. Of course. Take your time. After she left, I called Chase. He asked me to scan the form and send it over. 20 minutes later, he called back. Don't sign that. It would give her lawyers access to all your medical records, including psychiatric evaluations. They could cherry-pick anything to support an incompetency claim. She's building a case against me. I'm afraid it's worse than that. Wednesday morning at 9:15, a courier delivered an official document. Petition for competency evaluation. Sloan Calloway requests the court determine Henry Hayes is unable to manage his own affairs due to increasing forgetfulness, missed appointments, paranoid accusations against family members, and confusion about dates and events. Attached statements from Dr. Sagecross, noting I'd seemed distracted during recent appointments. Grief over Rose twisted into evidence of decline. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks from today. If she won, Sloan would control everything: my ranch, my finances, my freedom to fight for Nash. She'd make me exactly what she'd made my son, a prisoner of her guardianship, while she dismantled our lives. I called Chase immediately. She's trying to do to me what she did to Nash. His voice was grim when he answered. She's moving faster than I expected, Henry. This is aggressive. We need evidence, solid, irrefutable proof that Nash's guardianship was fraudulent, and we need it within 3 weeks. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks from today. Chase's voice crackled through the phone. She's escalating because she's worried. We need evidence, Henry, solid, irrefutable proof, and we need it fast. The days had blurred into a haze of preparation and dread. Then 10 days before the hearing, Ford called at dawn. Yeah, I found someone inside, he said without preamble. She's willing to talk. By 6 that morning, a woman in her early 30s stood in my kitchen, dark circles under her eyes and a USB drive clutched in her hand. Page North. She'd worked at Cedarbrook for 4 years as a registered nurse, until 2 weeks ago when her conscience finally won. I can't testify, she said immediately, her voice tight. I have a daughter. I saw what happened to that reporter who asked questions, but I made copies before I left. She slid the drive across the table like it burned her fingers. Behind her, Ford stood silent, watching the windows. Nash Hayes is listed as severe traumatic brain injury with diminished capacity, Page said. But his chart notes don't match that diagnosis. His cognitive assessments show normal function. His vitals are stable. He communicates clearly with staff when we're allowed to interact with him, which isn't often. My hands shook as I picked up the drive. Why the restrictions? Dr. Flynn West signs off on everything Sloan requests. Minimal contact, no outside calls, limited recreation time. The billing goes through at $18,500 a month, but the actual care level, she shook her head, maybe $5,000. The rest disappears into administrative fees and services Nash never receives. She pulled out printed emails. I recognized Sloan's name in the header, Dr. West's, in the reply. We need to maintain necessary restrictions given the guardianship circumstances. Family contact remains inadvisable at this time. There are dozens of cases like Nash at Cedarbrook, Page said quietly. People who could go home. People whose families don't even know they're there. It's a system, Mr. Hayes, and your son got caught in it. Ford walked her out. When he returned, he handed me a second set of documents, photos he'd taken during a midnight reconnaissance of Cedarbrook's exterior floor plans shift schedules. Sloane's hosting a video call tonight, he said. 6 o'clock. You, Nash, and the grandkids. She thinks it'll make her look good for the competency, hearing the devoted daughter-in-law keeping the family connected. But we're going to watch your son very carefully. That evening, Sloane's living room felt like a stage. Ivy and Knox sat beside me on the couch, scrubbed and nervous. The laptop screen flickered, and then Nash appeared. He looked thinner than in Dean's photograph, tired, but his eyes were clear. "Hi, Dad," he said, his voice rough but steady. Ivy and Knox erupted in excited chatter. Nash smiled at them, asked about school, about the ranch. Every response was lucid, appropriate, present. Then his gaze locked on mine, and I saw it, the deliberate blink, the slight tap of his fingers against his chest, the micro-expression that said, "I'm here. I'm aware. I need you to see me." Sloane hovered at the edge of frame monitoring. Nash kept talking to the kids, kept his voice light, but his eyes never left mine. When the call ended, I sat in the silence of Sloane's house and understood my son wasn't sick. He was trapped. Sunday night, Chase called with the news. Dean Shaw dead. Single vehicle accident on Highway 26 3 days after delivering a mysterious package. The police called it driver fatigue. I knew better. The hearing was now 9 days away. We had our evidence. But I also knew the cost of speaking the truth and how far someone would go to bury it. The morning of the hearing arrived cold and gray. I drove to Portland alone, leaving the ranch before sunrise, the weight of Rose's trust document and Dean Shaw's sacrifice pressing against my chest. Multnomah County Courthouse rose from the downtown blocks like a monument to judgment. Inside, the wood-paneled courtroom felt designed to intimidate. High ceilings, fluorescent lights that washed everything pale, the judge's bench elevated like an altar. Sloane sat across the aisle with 3 lawyers flanking her. Blair Storm, her lead counsel, looked expensive and sharp in a charcoal suit. Sloane herself wore navy blue and an expression of concerned worry, the devoted daughter-in-law forced to make difficult decisions. I wanted to be sick. At 9 o'clock exactly, we rose for Judge Grace Mills. She was in her early 60s, gray hair, pulled back eyes that missed nothing. Her reputation preceded her, fair but intolerant of games. Blair Storm opened with practiced sympathy. "Your Honor, we're here because of serious concerns regarding Henry Hayes' declining mental competency. Over recent months, Mr. Hayes has exhibited forgetfulness, missed medical appointments, and made paranoid accusations against his daughter-in-law. He claims his son, who receives necessary care for traumatic brain injury, is being held captive. He alleges his loving daughter-in-law has broken into his home. These are not the actions of someone capable of managing a 30-acre ranch and substantial assets." She presented doctor's notes, incident reports. I listened as every truth I discovered got twisted into evidence of delusion. Each word felt like a knife. Chase stood. "Your Honor, Mr. Hayes isn't incompetent. He's uncovered a criminal conspiracy, and Ms. Calloway is attempting to silence him the same way she silenced his son." "Objection!" Blair's voice cracked like a whip. Judge Mills raised one hand. "I'll allow it. Continue, Mr. Holt." Chase set up his laptop with deliberate calm. "Your Honor, these are security recordings from Mr. Hayes' residence." The first video filled the screen. Date stamp last November. Sloane appeared using her own key entering while I was away at a cattle auction. She moved with purpose straight to the file cabinet in Rose's old office, photographing documents, searching with methodical efficiency. The courtroom stirred. A second video. Different date, same pattern. A third, fourth, 6 videos, total spanning 14 months. Every time I left the property, Sloane had entered, documenting, searching. Sloane's face drained of color. Blair scrambled. "Your Honor, Ms. Calloway has a key. She was simply concerned about her father-in-law's welfare. Welfare checks don't include photographing financial documents and rifling through private papers." Chase cut in. This was a calculated intrusion to locate something specific. He turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the truth is, Nash Hayes isn't incapacitated. His guardianship was obtained through fraud. We have medical evidence from facility staff that he's fully lucid and has been trying to contact his family for months. We request Nash Hayes be brought before this court for independent psychiatric evaluation." Blair exploded. "Objection. This is inappropriate outside the scope. Nash Hayes is severely impaired. Transporting him would cause psychological trauma." Judge Mills' gavel came down once. Ms. Storm, if Mr. Hayes is as impaired as you claim, an evaluation will confirm it. If he's not, we have serious questions about this guardianship. She looked at the bailiff. I'm ordering Nash Hayes brought to this courthouse immediately for evaluation by a court-appointed psychiatrist. We'll reconvene at 2 p.m. The gavel struck steel against wood. Sloane's composure cracked for just a moment as she leaned toward her lawyers, whispering urgently. In 2 hours my son would walk through that courtroom door, and the truth would finally step into the light. At exactly 2 o'clock the courtroom doors opened. They wheeled Nash in a wheelchair he didn't need part of Sloane's final performance. He looked thin, exhausted, but his eyes found mine immediately blazing with recognition and fierce hope. I hadn't seen my son in 3 years, 2 months, and 8 days. The man in that chair wasn't the ghost Sloane had described. He was trapped, but he was present. Judge Mills nodded to the bailiff. Bring in Dr. Stone. Dr. Wade Stone, the court-appointed psychiatrist, took the stand with the calm authority of someone who dealt in facts, not manipulation. Your Honor, I've completed my evaluation of Nash Hayes. My findings. Mr. Hayes is fully lucid. He understands his circumstances, communicates clearly, and shows no signs of the impairment described in facility records. He does not require a guardian and should be allowed to speak for himself. In my professional opinion, his continued institutionalization has no medical basis. The courtroom erupted. Judge Mills' gavel cracked down. Blair Storm tried to object, but the judge cut her off. Dr. Stone's credentials are impeccable. Mr. Hayes, do you understand why you're here? Nash's voice came rough from disuse, but clear. Yes, Your Honor. I understand my wife petitioned for guardianship, claiming I was incompetent. I understand she's now trying to do the same thing to my father, and I understand it's time to tell the truth. Then please do. Nash took a breath. I watched him gather strength from some reserve I didn't know he still had. 3 years ago, my wife and I argued about money. I have a trust fund my mother established with specific restrictions on access. Sloane wanted me to break those restrictions, withdraw the principal immediately for investments. I refused. She became aggressive, angry. We were standing near the top of the stairs in our house. She pushed me. I fell. His voice stayed steady, factual. I woke up in the hospital with a head injury, confused. By the time I was clear-headed enough to understand what happened, she'd secured guardianship, told doctors I was having delusions, that I was violent. I tried to tell facility staff, but Dr. Flynn West dismissed it as post-trauma fabrication. I tried to get messages out, but every communication was monitored, controlled. I've been imprisoned for 3 years, Your Honor, locked away while my wife drained my accounts and searched my father's house for documents that would let her control everything. Blair Storm lunged to her feet. This is textbook false memory from brain trauma. Chase stood calmly. Your Honor, there's one more piece of evidence. He nodded to Ford. The recording played a conversation from the courthouse hallway 90 minutes earlier during recess. Sloane's voice confronting Henry in a moment she thought was private. You should have signed what I needed, Henry. You should have stayed confused and compliant. Nash was never good enough, never ambitious enough. When he fell down those stairs, I saw an opportunity to protect my children's inheritance from his incompetence control everything. You forced me into steps I didn't want to take. Oregon's one-party consent law made Ford's recording legal. He'd been part of the conversation, standing beside Henry the entire time. The courtroom went silent. Judge Mills's face was granite. I've heard enough. Nash Hayes's guardianship is terminated effective immediately. Ms. Calloway's petition regarding Henry Hayes is dismissed with prejudice. Mr. Hayes will be discharged from Cedar Brook today. I'm ordering immediate investigation into Ms. Calloway for guardianship fraud, financial exploitation, and possible attempted homicide. This court is adjourned. The gavel struck like thunder. As the sound echoed, Sloane's face went bloodless. That evening she was arrested at her home, the beginning of justice, but not yet the end. 6 months after the trial, Nash and the kids had moved back to the ranch. The house that felt hollow after Rose died now brimmed with life children's laughter. My son's voice reading bedtime stories, the sound of healing. What followed the trial came swift and thorough. Sloane was convicted on multiple counts: guardianship fraud, financial exploitation, conspiracy. 15 years in prison, no early parole. The Cedar Brook investigation expanded like wildfire. Dr. Flynn West and 3 staff arrested for conspiracy. 12 other patients identified in similar circumstances, people hidden away by families seeking control of assets, stolen lives locked behind coded doors. All freed guardianships reviewed. The facility shuttered permanently. Page North received immunity in exchange for testimony, now working for a guardianship reform advocacy group. Dean Shaw's family learned the truth about his heroic actions. I visited them, personally made sure they knew their husband and father had saved Nash's life. Without Dean's courage that Saturday morning at the market, my son would still be imprisoned. We owe him everything. Quinn Drake's death investigation was reopened, though no charges filed yet. Nash came home 3 days after the hearing, Ivy and Knox a week later after family therapy. The transition was hardest on the kids. Their mother in prison, their father, someone they barely remembered. Their grandfather, who'd seemed old, suddenly revealed as a fierce warrior. But gradually healing came. Nash took over ranch work, mending fences, tending cattle tasks his body remembered, even when his mind wrestled with 3 lost years. Therapy for all of them, rebuilding relationships through small moments. Pancake breakfast, homework, help bedtime stories. Nash was relearning how to tell. Ivy struggled, more angry at her mother, grieving the future she'd imagined. Knox proved more resilient, younger, and adaptable. Family dinners every night, passing dishes, sharing days, slowly stitching back what Sloan had torn apart. One autumn evening, 6 months gone, I sat on the porch, watching sunset spill across my fields. Nash sat beside me, Knox, in his lap, Ivy leaning against my chair. Fireflies began their dance. "I never thanked you properly," Nash said quietly, "for not giving up, for believing when you couldn't even talk to me." I squeezed my son's shoulder. "You're my boy. Giving up was never an option." Inside Rose's photo stood on the mantel beside her framed letter. Words I'd memorized. "Fight for our son. You're stronger than you think." I had. Not through violence or wealth or power, but by refusing to accept comfortable lies, by trusting instinct, by taking one step at a time when everything seemed impossible. Truth had won. Justice had come. Not loud, not celebrated in newspapers, but here in my son's laughter, my grandchildren's healing, the ranch reclaimed from those who'd tried to steal it. "Grandpa, tell us a story," Ivy asked. I smiled. "Once upon a time, there was a man who thought he understood everything about his family. I told them a carefully edited version about the heroic father held prisoner, the brave grandfather who fought for truth and justice that prevailed. Someday they'd know all the details. Tonight they needed hope. The stars emerged, fireflies glowed, family together. This was victory. This was everything. Looking back on this true story, I see a man who almost lost everything because I chose comfort over truth. Don't be like me. Don't ignore the warning signs when someone you trust starts controlling the narrative. Don't wait 3 years to ask the hard questions. God gave us instincts for a reason, that unease. I felt watching Sloan smile never reach her eyes, the wrongness of Nash's sudden travels. I ignored those gifts God planted in my spirit because confronting them seemed too hard. That nearly cost me my son. Here's what these grandpa stories have taught me. Evil thrives when good people choose convenience over courage. When that package arrived at the farmer's market, God was offering me a chance to fight. I could have dismissed it, called it a mistake, gone back to my comfortable lie. Instead, I chose the harder path and found my family on the other side. This true story isn't unique. Right now, somewhere in America, another family is being torn apart by guardianship. Fraud, financial exploitation, someone using the legal system as a weapon. These grandpa stories need to be told, heard, and shared because they carry lessons that might save someone's life. Your courage to speak up could be the difference. God put you in your family for a purpose. Don't let fear silence you when something feels wrong. That's the heart of all grandpa stories worth telling. We fight for those we love. If this true story moved you, please leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss another powerful narrative. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. Your voice matters. Your story matters. Together, we fight for truth.